It took a lot for me to be able to even drive again.
They're the ones that suffer, that cry, that ask for mom and dad. What are we going to say when they ask where their parents are?
Imagine living your life knowing that a decision you made not only killed innocent people, but also destroyed several lives, including your own. That's the reality for the people in this video who chose to drive while drunk and ended up causing tragic accidents.
I've struggled with alcoholism my whole life. I'm so mad I ever took a drink.
And they still have to pay for their actions. Let's take a look at how these drunk drivers react to life sentences. In December 2020, 27-year-old Henry Eduardo Solana Mija was driving with his wife, 26-year-old Gabriela Andrade, and their 3 young daughters. It was supposed to be a fun family outing as they were taking the girls, who were between the ages of 1 and 5, to go look at some Christmas lights. But the evening would turn into a horrific nightmare. Out of nowhere, 23-year-old Grace Elizabeth Coleman, who was drunk driving, crashed into the family's vehicle, killing Henry and Gabriela and injuring their daughters.
Accused of driving drunk, slamming into a car carrying a family of 5 and killing the parents, now faces murder charges.
This all went down in Newport Beach. Henry, a hard-working family man, had some errands to run that night that this happened, but he wanted to spend some quality time with his wife and children. He felt bad that they had been cooped up inside for so long as a result of COVID-19. Take a look at how the family's vehicle was completely destroyed in the accident.
A devastating scene in Newport Beach, a family of 5 torn apart by a horrific car crash. The parents were killed and their 3 children were badly hurt.
And the driver behind the tragedy apparently has a history of driving drunk.
Yeah. Grace, who was publicly identified as the driver, has been arrested in the past for DUI. She did sustain injuries during the crash and was taken to the hospital. A guard was positioned outside her hospital room door to make sure she didn't try to make a run for it.
Coleman is in custody on suspicion of murder, DUI, and hit and run. Officers say in the minutes after the crash, the suspect attempted to leave the scene but was eventually caught.
Can you imagine not only doing this, but then fleeing the scene instead of owning up to what you did? She didn't even try to check on the family or offer them any sort of help. This is an incredibly heartless move.
This heartbreaking image shows emergency crews pushing a gurney with the youngest girl still strapped into an infant seat.
It was reported that the children were in the back seat and were incredibly distraught and pulling their mom's hair in an attempt to wake her up. She was already dead. One of the children had 2 broken legs and a broken arm. Another had a broken leg and damage to her head, and the other a broken ankle. They survived their injuries, but were left as orphans with an incredible trauma that will likely haunt them for the rest of their lives. A family member of the victim said that the only reason Henry had been driving in the area that night was because he needed to pick up some supplies from a former job site. It was just going to be a quick stop before going to view the Christmas lights. A neighbor of the family expressed his shock and disbelief over what had happened.
This is just, I just can't believe it. I just can't believe what happened.
Meanwhile, after recovering from her injuries, Grace was transferred to jail. Then 2 weeks later, she was finally brought in to face a judge.
Grace Coleman, the Newport Beach murder suspect, appeared on video from the jail as her lawyers tried to convince a judge to grant her bail.
There were some different things to consider in terms of whether or not the judge would grant her bail. One thing was her blood alcohol level, which was determined to have been twice the legal limit. Before getting on the road that night, she had been at a brewery. She was reportedly pictured in friends' videos drinking multiple mixed drinks and was seen falling into a bush, but she didn't drive herself home.
She's transported by a person to the safety of her home, did not drive, and chose to then get in her vehicle within minutes of arriving home, and within 10 minutes drove and killed 2 people.
Grace's lawyers asked for her bail to be set at $1 million. This is standard practice for those accused of murder. But there were several serious concerns associated with possibly allowing her to have bail. While in custody, she had made several remarks about wanting to hurt herself or trying to run away. There was also concern about her home life and if her parents could get her into even more trouble.
When the search warrant was executed at her residence, there was alcohol in her room. Her father was present and he was drinking when the search warrant was executed. And he also has a prior conviction for DUI.
But lawyers for Grace said that if she was to be released on bail, she would immediately be moved to an alcohol treatment facility where she would remain 24/7 and would have no access to alcohol. But the judge was not convinced.
Bail was denied. The DA says that Grace Coleman is accused of being involved in 2 other recent events involving alcohol and driving. One was just 3.5 months ago.
On July 29th, 2022, Grace was sentenced to 21 years in prison after pleading guilty to the crash that destroyed a family.
It's very painful because they're not here to be with us to celebrate those milestones. It's very heartbreaking, and I just want to give a message to people: be responsible, don't drink and drive.
Watch as Gabriella's mother wiped away tears while a translator read aloud her sentence in the courtroom.
It was the worst thing that I could have heard, a pain that I will never be able to overcome.
2 of the little girls wrote letters and included drawings. The letters were read aloud.
My name is Emma Sofia. I write this letter because I miss my mom. My name is Elena. I miss my mom and my dad. I feel sad.
The judge presiding over the case spoke to the surviving family members who were mourning the deaths of Henry and Gabriella. He was visibly emotional and had trouble speaking.
I sense strongly that they would want you to continue to live your life with joy, to appreciate every day, to raise those precious girls. I'm sorry.
Grace, who wore a mask in court, wiped away her tears as she listened to the family's impact statements. The DA, Jennifer Walker, spoke about her opinion on the sentence.
It was what I did hope for because Judge Prickett gave a lid of 21 to life. So as a representative for the people, I did not want her to receive any less than that.
Family members say the 3 little girls have been affected the most and deeply want their parents back.
They're the ones that suffer, that cry, that ask for mom and dad. What are we going to say when they ask where their parents are? They're the ones who ask.
In September of 2018, 48-year-old Todd Grudznske put on his Packers jersey to go out for a day of partying. He went to 3 different bars and guzzled shots of hard liquor and plenty of beer while watching football. In total, he was reported to have taken 16 different drinks. Then he got into his pickup truck and ended up slamming into a car being driven by 25-year-old Angela Wimmer. She was badly injured and died in the hospital just hours later. Todd was arrested shortly after the crash. His blood alcohol level was still high an hour after the crash. But you won't believe what the craziest part of this case is. Todd had been arrested for DUI in the past. Not once, not twice, but 6 different times. In the year 2000, he was arrested twice, then once in 2001, twice in 2003, and once in 2007. It's hard to believe he was out of jail, much less had a valid license.
Investigation found that in case after case, Grudznske got lucky. Plea deals, reduced jail sentences, cases where he avoided DUI charges altogether.
You'll be shocked to hear just how much Todd was able to somehow get away with over the years, time and time again.
2004, an odor of an alcoholic beverage on his breath. 2011, a report he was driving erratically. He's wasted, his wife said. 2017, a night out to have a few drinks, and an incidence of domestic violence.
Clearly, there were signs before this tragic accident that showed that Todd needed serious legal repercussions or court-ordered substance misuse treatment before he seriously hurt someone else. But this did not happen. If it had, Angela may still be here today. Angela lived a much different life than Todd. Angela grew up in Texas, where she dedicated her life to her Catholic faith. Her parents described her as confident and an outgoing girl who wasn't scared to try new things.
She actually really loved life. She had a warm personality, and she wasn't afraid to laugh and to make jokes and things like that.
While Angela was growing up, going to school and making memories with loved ones, Todd was living a very different life. Todd, the man who was a tree trimmer by profession, was constantly getting into trouble with the law, racking up charge after charge and mugshot after mugshot. Over 2 decades, he was arrested 15 different times. Despite being given multiple chances, he never changed his way. By September 30th, Angela had grown up, attended college, and moved to Colorado. All the time, she was getting ready to go to church, and Todd was preparing for a day of reckless partying. Here he is, captured on surveillance at one of the several bars he would go to that day.
At the first bar, a beer and 3 shots of Rumpelmans, another beer and a shot of tequila at the next one. Then, at the last stop, a beer, a whiskey, another beer, and 4 more whiskeys.
He took all of these before 12:39 p.m. He'd clearly gotten an early start. When he left the bar, Angela was sitting at a red light in her new Mazda when suddenly a pickup rammed into her.
911.
There's a bad accident at Colfax and Kipling.
It was reported that Todd was traveling as fast as 64 miles per hour when he slammed into Angela. Angela's car went flying at 44 miles per hour. This would result in 3 other vehicles also being hit.
I saw a bunch of smoke, steam, something up ahead.
Becky, the woman in that video, is an EMT, and when she saw the crash, she rushed to help.
She was in such a position, I didn't see her immediately.
Then she ran to the truck, where a man in a Packers jersey appeared to her to be trying to get away.
Todd had put his car into reverse and was gunning the engine in hopes of getting away. Becky immediately realized something must be going on with this man.
He wanted out of there, and he would, when I was like, you've got to put it into park, and he'd just shake his head, nope.
Becky and other Good Samaritans were eventually able to get Angela out of the car, but it was clear that her injuries were very severe and that she would be lucky to survive. While she was rushed to the hospital, Angela's parents received a phone call that would change their lives forever.
The policeman said that she had been in a car accident and that she was in surgery and she was having brain surgery.
Angela's parents were greatly concerned and were in the process of trying to figure out the fastest way to get to Colorado when they received a second phone call.
And he said that that she had passed away. So that was the most horrible. I think that's the worst thing that has ever happened to me in my entire life.
Angela's parents were relieved that their daughter's killer was taken into custody, but they didn't understand why he had been permitted to be out on the road, considering his history.
I'm glad he's behind bars. I'm glad he's not out on bond. I just don't know. I don't know what to say. If they're not locked up, what's to keep them from driving and doing it again?
It appeared that Todd had finally, after all these years, run out of second chances. He was charged with murder, vehicular homicide, 3 counts of first-degree assault, and 2 counts of reckless driving. He initially pled not guilty, but was later convicted. In court, Todd was allowed to address the judge and tell him anything he would like to be considered before his sentence was handed down. He reacted to the likelihood that he would receive a life sentence and apologized to Angela's family.
I am so remorseful and so sorry that I did what I did.
Todd, who was also injured in the crash, explained how he was laying in a hospital bed when he turned on the news and realized what he had done. He had taken a life.
The second I knew what I did, the second I knew I was in an accident, I was remorseful. I reached out to a chaplain at the hospital immediately. I've expressed my remorse the entire time. I do not feel that I am a victim. The victim has passed away.
Todd went on to express his long-term struggle with alcohol misuse. He said that he wished he had never taken a sip of alcohol to begin with.
I've struggled with alcoholism my whole life. I'm so mad I ever took a drink. Not drinking behind the wheel, not just that, drinking, period. I wish I would have never drank. And I had struggled with it. And as time went on, I let my alcoholism fade what I have done.
Todd said that despite all the pain he caused as a result of his actions, he was determined to make a positive change and try to make a difference in the world.
Well, I am never going to drink again, and I will never let this moment right now fade. I will dedicate my life behind walls to helping others to never take a drink, to never drink and drive. I do all I can to help in here. with young men, and it's good therapy for me. But I am so sorry that my ignorance caused all this.
He also apologized to those he directly hurt by deciding to drink and drive.
I pray daily for their recovery. I pray for my own family and my friends and the friends of Angela Wimmer to recover. And I just want to apologize to everybody else involved, the West Metro Fire Department, the Lakewood Police Department, the court system. I'm sorry.
Todd ended by saying that he hopes that others will learn from his horrific mistake to never do what he did.
I hope people watch this and see this, and we'll never get behind a wheel again. Call an Uber, call a taxi, or better yet, give up drinking. So, again, my apologies, and my apologies to you, Your Honor.
While in court, the judge also gave other victims that were involved in the accident a chance to speak.
It took a lot for me to be able to even drive again.
He also heard statements from some of Todd's friends who came forward to try to express the good characteristics he had.
I've only known him to be caring and kind and helpful.
He has expressed his complete contempt for himself. He has stated how much he regrets the accident and would do anything to be able to change places with the victims.
But would the judge let their kind words sway his final decision and choose to offer life in prison with parole, or would he lock up Todd for good? Eventually, due to the extent of his previous criminal activities and the number of chances he had already been given, the judge's hands were tied.
In the end, Grudznske received life in prison without the possibility for parole. The judge said his 5 prior DUI convictions couldn't allow him to give him anything less. Grudznske will spend the rest of his life in jail.
Today, if Angela's parents want to visit their daughter, their only option is to drive to the cemetery and go to her grave. They remain dedicated to spreading awareness about the dangers of drunk driving in hopes that no more families are destroyed.
I just think if the legislatures and everyone would just have seen what we went through with our daughter, to have her in that car and not being able to get out of it. If they could just see that and see her life before, and what a waste of a life.
Becky, the woman who assisted in trying to save Angela's life, also recalls the trauma that she witnessed that day and wonders how it was ever allowed to happen in the first place. What was Todd doing on the road in the first place?
I've struggled a lot with that accident just because with 6 priors, why? Why is he driving? I don't understand that. Doesn't make sense to me.
That's a question we may never get the answers to. Can you imagine taking the lives of 5 different young people all in a matter of minutes? That's exactly what this next drunk driver did. On November 23rd, 2018, then 21-year-old Tanner Dashner was driving drunk through Fort Pierce, Florida. He was on the street in which the speed limit was only 35 miles per hour, but he was driving at a shocking estimate of 97 miles per hour. He ended up slamming into a Dodge Dakota, which was parked at a red light and had just barely been starting to accelerate. The Dodge Dakota flew into a BMW, which was in front of it. 27-year-old Kendon Tillett was driving the Dodge, which ignited fire as a result of the gas tank becoming compromised in the crash. Unfortunately, the Dodge was packed full of people at the time of the crash. In addition to Kendon, 17-year-old Alexis Cheney, 21-year-old Anthony Victor, 16-year-old Anthony Martin, and 21-year-old Darian Douglas were all killed. There was one other young girl in the car named Arione Stanberry. A passerby managed to pull the girl out of the vehicle and she survived. On the day of the crash, Tanner had been celebrating Thanksgiving a day early and was consuming a lot of alcohol. He had been at the bar that night where investigators say he was overserved. The bartenders continued to let him to drink even though he was heavily intoxicated. They also let him take alcohol out of the bar with him before getting into the vehicle and driving away. While he was at the bar, he took and posted this picture of himself on social media. The caption of it was, "Sloshed." His car essentially became a wrecking ball that endangered everyone on the roads that night.
Oh my God.
For the first time, surveillance video of the horrific crash that killed 5 people in St. Lucie County last November. You can see the victim's Dodge Dakota start to pull off when 21-year-old Tanner Dashner barrels his GMC Yukon into them.
Passers-by could barely believe their eyes as they watched all of this go down right in front of them. It was clear to all that this was an incredibly serious wreck. 911 calls began flooding in quickly.
It's on fire. I'm so sorry. I'm trying to pull somebody out of the car.
Tanner wasn't arrested immediately after the crash. In fact, it took 25 days.
Yeah, Michael Kelly, 21-year-old Tanner Ray Dashner now facing serious charges, including 5 counts of vehicular homicide and 5 counts of DUI manslaughter, carrying a $7.5 million bond.
Police say that Tanner's blood alcohol content was at a whopping 0.274, which is more than 3 times over the legal limit of 0.008. The court needed permission to obtain Tanner's medical records. This is part of why it took so long for the arrest to occur. A family member of Alexis Cheney spoke out about her reaction to the arrest finally being made.
While they are happy the individual responsible for her death has finally been charged and will face the consequences of his actions, nothing can bring back their beloved Alexis.
Tanner ended up avoiding going to trial when he pleaded no contest to the 5 counts of DUI, vehicular manslaughter. In court, the lone survivor of the crash tearfully shared her experience, recalling how she called out to her friends but didn't receive a response.
In the backseat, that's when I was screaming for let name, and she wouldn't answer me. So that's when I was like, can somebody please answer me? Nobody would answer me. So I screamed for help.
The sentencing day finally came on June 28, 2022, several years after the crash took place. Before sentencing, Tanner was allowed to address the victims' families. While sitting shackled in a blue prison jumpsuit with his hair slicked back, he held a handwritten statement which he read aloud. He addressed each of the families of the different victims individually.
To the family of Anthony Victor, I am sorry. I'm sorry that you'll never be able to see your son again. I'm sorry that you'll never get to see him smile or hear him laugh ever again.
As he went down the line, he addressed things that the family members of the victims would miss out on a result of his actions. This included things like the ability to comfort them in times of trouble and celebrate their different times of success.
I'm sorry that you will never get to hear your daughter tell you about her hopes and dreams for the future. I'm sorry that you will never get to see the impact that she could have had in the world.
He did not leave out Ariana Stanberry, the sole survivor who lost 5 friends in an instant and almost lost her life as well.
I'm sorry for all the emotional and physical trauma that I have caused you. I am sorry for the friends that you lost in this accident.
Family members in the court could be seen wiping away tears as Tanner continued.
I hope that you will be able to heal from this and have a happy and successful life. I've never intended to hurt anyone in my life. I regret the poor decisions I've made and am sorry to all the families that I have devastated because of this terrible accident.
He ended by saying that he hoped that his sentence, whatever it ended up being, would at least provide them some closure so that they could begin to heal and move on. Before the sentence was officially handed down, Tanner's father tearfully stood up and asked for mercy for his son.
This is a terrible mistake, and I pray that the families involved will be able to forgive Tanner.
Ultimately, Tanner was sentenced to 72 years in prison for his crime, meaning he will likely spend the rest of his life behind bars. This is a photo of him leaving the courtroom following the sentencing. He wore a mask, which made it difficult to tell exactly what his reaction was, but he appeared stoic. The reaction outside the courthouse that day was one of relief, as family members of the victims could now finally begin to put all of this behind them.
I believe in God, and I can forgive, but I won't forget.
31-year-old Amber Peria of Tampa Bay, Florida, was under the influence of alcohol while driving on the expressway in 2017. She ended up hitting a car, causing it to fly into a different lane, where it struck 2 other vehicles and burst into flames. Luis Felipak, his wife Rita, and their 8-year-old daughter, Georgia, were all killed. Amber fled the scene but eventually could no longer drive due to how much damage her vehicle had sustained in the crash. She was then arrested. Just look at the intense damage caused during the crash. As soon as people realized what had gone on, they rushed to try and help the victims. But despite their best efforts, there was nothing that could be done to help the Felipak family. Reporters reached out to Amber's mother, but she did not respond. Amber's partner did give a brief statement.
It's a devastating situation for all parties involved.
Amber was found with 2 other prescription medications in her system that were used to treat anxiety. Could there be more to the story? Amber's partner seems to think so.
You know, it will come out, but I really don't want to say anything other than that.
During her first court appearance, Amber could be seen sobbing uncontrollably, wiping away tears, and appeared to be praying. She tried to get out of it, telling police that she regularly had seizures and that it was a seizure that caused the accident, not alcohol. Amber's grandma spoke to a reporter to back up this claim.
Ryan, the grandma told you she is not a monster.
That's right. The grandmother tells us that her granddaughter has had seizures in the past, and a seizure may have led to the crash on the Selman Expressway.
The court did not believe her and denied her bail. She laid her hand on the desk and openly wept. This wasn't Amber's first run-in with the law.
We checked court and jail records and found that Peria was arrested only once before. In 2010, she was locked up in Hillsborough County for grand theft.
Amber was charged with DUI manslaughter, DUI with serious bodily injury, and leaving the scene of the crime involving death. She later pleaded guilty. Amber would not be sentenced until 2019, 2 years after the fiery crash. Her appearance was so drastically different that it's hard to tell that it was even the same person. Judge Christopher Sabella pointed out a comment that Amber made while being taken into custody about having ruined her life.
Yes, ma'am, your life is ruined, but you also ruined a lot of lives and ended 3 lives.
Louise's father took the stand to provide his victim impact statement. He didn't hold back his anger and heartbreak.
You've taken everything from us. You can't give it back. And nor will you ever give it back. I can't forgive you. There is no forgiveness for this.
He became so emotional that he could not continue and asked to take a break. Another victim who was involved in the crash but survived also came forward to tearfully explain her experience.
I wake up several times at night from pain, but also from nightmares. My nightmares include being left at the scene, abandoned at the scene, screaming for help when you weren't there.
While listening to the impact statements, Amber appeared stoic and did not shed any tears. Amber's defense asked for her to receive no more than 20 years, but the judge wasn't having any of that.
Judge Sabella slapped her with 50 years, which is pretty much a life sentence.
Watch as Amber finds out that she'll be living the rest of her life behind bars. She simply puts her head on the desk and once again sobs. This is a stark difference in comparison to how she behaved while the victims read their statements. Finally, the family members of those lost tragically soon had the justice they were waiting for. If anything can be learned from these horror stories, it is that it is never a good idea to get behind the wheel after consuming alcohol. It doesn't matter whether you think you're okay to drive or not. Getting behind the wheel after drinking could be the worst decision you make in your entire life and change everything forever. Don't risk it. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to subscribe.